As we announced already, our time this morning, Lord willing, is going to be spent thinking about what the Bible says about the problem of doubt. Now, what I'd like to do right first is just get something out in the open, and it's not what's in this bag. That comes later. My question for you is, when it comes to doubt, what are we so afraid of? I know this is not exactly the time for question and answer or calling back a response, but I think if we were to put this out in a more interactive format, it would be something along the lines of, we as Christians are afraid of doubt because we know of Christians who have given in to their doubts and left their faith. Now, there may be other varied answers, and maybe something parallel to that. But I think our most basic fear when it comes to doubt is the one of experience. We've seen people who have expressed doubts in their faith, and then all of a sudden, they're not Christians anymore, or they've stopped coming to services. They've given up, it seems like. Every time we see someone say, well, they have big questions about God, like it or not, the red flag goes off in our mind, and we say, well, they're either close or they're gone. And that's not fair, but it's happened so often, you can't really blame us for having such a response. So then what we typically do is we overcorrect. What I'm about to describe to you isn't as far-fetched as you might sound, or as it might sound, but when we think about the idea of people having doubt, then what we should do as Christians is just to outlaw all doubt anywhere at all times. Because so often we see doubt leads to faithlessness, and so we go, okay, no more questions. Right? There's no room anymore to express uncertainty. There's no room for searching out the truth. There's no room for expressing to other people you have doubts. There never seems to be now a good time to express uncertainty, because the moment that we do, someone somewhere's going, well, they're on their way out the door. We've painted ourselves into a corner. We need to learn how to get back out of that corner. In so doing, we've made all doubt shameful. And because of this, when we have those questions, when something very real, very legitimate, very troubling comes into our mind, we start looking at ourselves going, I must be a bad Christian. There must be something wrong with my faith, because faithful people don't think this way. And that's just not true. It's not fair. It's certainly not helpful. That feeling is only exasperated by further Bible study sometimes. We read passages like Matthew 21 and in verse 21 where Jesus told His followers, have faith and do not doubt. And we think to ourselves, well, now I have a question, but what do I do with it? Jesus said don't have questions. That's not what He said, by the way. We're going to get to that. We read passages like Romans chapter 4 and verse 20 about the example of Abraham, where it says there that no unbelief made him waver concerning the promise of God. When you start to have feelings of wavering, you start to wonder, what's wrong with me? We know that on some level, doubt is shameful. We get it coming and going. We don't know which is true. Am I allowed to have it or am I not? You might remember Elijah got onto the Israelites at Mount Carmel because they couldn't decide whether they wanted to follow Yahweh or follow Baal. And Elijah asked them, why do you go on limping between two opinions? My task today is the task I had to undergo in my office several weeks ago, which is, how do you make sense of this? And like Corey said earlier, because he went through a thing and now we get to all experience it, you all get to go through my thing now, where I had to sort through this. What I'd like to do this morning is show you there's at least two different versions of doubt. When we say the word doubt, we mean a couple of different things. And often the problem is we've gotten one or the other out of place. The Bible talks about doubt in two different ways. It talks about the doubt that is healthy, that is necessary, that's part of our reasoning and thinking process, part of our process of evaluating evidence and making decisions. We make decisions based not on absolute certainty, but based on best evidence. And there is a sense of doubt where we have to reevaluate that evidence and come to a new conclusion. But then there is the unhealthy sort of doubt, the sort of doubt that refuses to make a decision. And my goal this morning is to get us to see both and to help us understand the difference between the two. First of all, what do we mean by good doubt? I already said that, so we're moving on. My apologies to Thomas. There should be a rule with picking Bible readings. It has to take longer to read it than it takes to get there. That's my mistake. But I figured this is the first key passage, so I said let's read this one together. Proverbs 18 and verse 17 says, "The one who states his case first seems right, until the other comes and examines him." The one who states his case first seems right, until the other comes and examines him. This passage describes a situation you could see being played out, I think, best in a courtroom setting. You can see this played out maybe among children in your own family. The first child who runs up complaining that something happened, we assume that child's right, and then child number 2 comes along and now they've got a different story, and we have to sort of figure out who is who. But in the more serious sense, this goes on in trials, civil and criminal, all the time. When a trial is set and someone is accused of something, usually the first team to come up is the prosecution, right? The people who are going to prove the case that so-and-so committed such and such crime. And they get up in front of the audience or in front of the jury or in front of the judge, and they start laying out evidence. We saw so-and-so at this place. There's receipts. There's videotape. There's eyewitness testimony. There's this and this and this evidence, all showing that the accused is guilty. Well, if you're a person sitting in the jury, after the prosecution gets done, you might sit there and go, "Yep, seems pretty clear. They did it. They've stated their case well." But then what happens? Well, then the defense comes along, and they say, no, he didn't do or she didn't do the crime. Here's our evidence to that effect. Here's our witnesses, our testimony. Here's our problems with what they presented, and so on and so on and so on. At what time in this process does doubt happen? I submit to you that doubt happens after the defense presents their case. Because after the prosecution presents their case, you might be going, "Well, yeah, it seems pretty clear. It looks like they did it." But then what happens? Someone comes along and presents different evidence that comes to a different conclusion. Now, in the mind of whoever's in the jury or the judge, now we got to see what's what. Now we have to come to a decision. If we knew with absolute 100% ironclad certainty that the person was guilty or innocent, there would be no trial. We would just state the case and give out the punishment or let him go. But because we can't act on absolute certainty, now we have to judge. Now, my question for you, is this sort of doubt good or bad? Is this a good thing or a bad thing? Is there good reason for a few thousand years of jurisprudence or not? I think all of us understand this is what has to happen. This is the most fair way, the most accurate way humankind has come up with to determine whether or not crime has been committed, is to have both sides present evidence and see who wins. See who has been judged to be true. When we think about doubt in this sense, you can understand just how positive it is. What if you're the accused? What if you're the person on trial? This sort of doubt is extremely positive. You want all the evidence to your defense being given for you. You want your opportunity, your day in court, as they say. This sort of doubt is absolutely positive. And this is the sort of doubt that one of the ways the Bible describes doubt. Mark, can I pick on you for a second? Do you mind coming here for a moment? Oh, no, it's fine. All right. If you'll face that way, arms straight ahead, elbows bent, palms up.
Elbows bent, palms.
So like this.
Oh.
There you go. Now, close your eyes. Both of them. All right? Now, wrong one. There we go. All right, I'm putting something in this hand, something in that hand. Now, what I want you to do is tell me which one of those is heavier. These are the two cans for the audience's sake.
I find them the same way.
How would you figure that out without looking?
The lever on my arm.
Okay. Would you like maybe move them around a little bit, see what you think? Test them, shake them, I don't know. Which one's heavier? Left or...
I still don't find a difference.
Well, you have to make a choice. You're not allowed to quit.
I'm going to go with right.
You going to go with right? Oh, sad day. You're off by an ounce.
Oh, man.
You're good. I can have it back now.
It's the story of my life.
Thank you. Turns out the can of cut green beans is 1 ounce heavier than the can of sweetened condensed milk. Challenging because this is more dense, but this is bigger. I don't know. Tough, right? But you might not have noticed it from the back, but when he was trying to figure out how heavy they were, he did move them a little bit. All right? He did, attempt to say, all right, which one's heavier? That's the sense in which the Bible uses doubt positively. The verb of this is diakrino, right? In the New Testament, the Greek word for this sort of doubting, well, actually all doubting, is diakrino. And it typically means to waver or to doubt or to judge or distinguish or separate. And that sense of judging or distinguishing or separating which of these two is the positive sense in which it's used. One definition for it, it's a decisive separation that leads to clear judgment or discernment. Judge, right? Discern, make a choice. There's a few ways this is used. In Matthew chapter 14 and Matthew chapter 16 and verse 3. We're going to come back to this passage in just a second, so it's an important one to sort of keep in front of you. Matthew chapter 16 and verse 3, the Pharisees approach Jesus, and they ask him to produce a sign from heaven, or sign in the heavens, or something to that effect. Jesus refuses. But notice what he tells them they are able to do in verse 3, or verses 2 and 3. Jesus tells them in verse 2 of chapter 16 in Matthew, when it's evening, you say, it'll be fair weather, for the sky is red. And in the morning, it will be stormy today, for the sky is red and threatening. You know how to interpret. That's the word. You know how to judge. You know how to look at the sky and figure out what's supposed to happen for the day. We even have that in our own vernacular, right? How's it go? Red sky at night, sailor's delight, right? We get that. Why? There's stuff in the sky that we can look at and go, okay, we've seen this before. We know what's going to happen, or somewhat know what's going to happen. Well, Jesus tells them, you're able to do that. Is that bad? No. You're able to look around you based on evidence and see what do you think is supposed to happen, right? That's the positive sense of doubt. In 1 Corinthians chapter 14, when Paul is giving the Corinthians instructions on how they're to have orderly and decent worship, okay, it's kind of some chaos there. One of the things he tells them in regard to how many people are allowed to speak at one time and how many and so on, he tells them in 1 Corinthians 14:29, let 2 or 3 prophets speak and let the others weigh what's said. It doesn't mean when a prophet gets up there, you go, oh, well, he's right. No, you think through it. You listen. You judge. You discern. You come to a decision as to whether or not what they say is true. Now, that's a positive thing. That's something I'm hoping you all are doing this morning. Listening to what's said, and is he right? Is he crazy? Don't answer that. But is he right? That's something we have to do. a little earlier in 1 Corinthians. I hope we've already done this morning. In the description of how the Corinthian brethren were to partake of the Lord's Supper. Everyone who eats and drinks without discerning the body, without judging, without thinking through, processing the body, eats and drinks judgment in himself. That's positive. There is nothing wrong with that. In fact, that sort of doubt is required of Christians. And if you are having that sort of doubt, it is not faithlessness. I'll give you an example of this. Look at Acts chapter 17 and verse 11, maybe the most memorable passage in chapter 17. We quote this one often, right? Acts chapter 17 and verse 11, talking about the good old Bereans. It says, these Jews were more noteworthy or more noble than those in Thessalonica. They received the word with all eagerness, examining the Scriptures daily to see if these things were so. What were they examining? Well, Paul and Silas had shown up to Berea, and they were presenting their case about Jesus. This is who Jesus is. This is what He did. He died on the cross. He's been raised from the dead. He now reigns in heaven. All those things, those basic elements of the gospel, they would have been explaining it to them. What were they doing? They were listening to Paul and Silas, and then they went to their Old Testament and said, is this right? Is this true? They searched their Scriptures to see if what they said was right. Is that negative? No, that's necessary doubt. It doesn't mean the Bereans were faithless. It means they were human. And because humans cannot make 100% absolute certain decisions about things, they're examining evidence. And that's what you and I have to learn to do. Oop, I'm off on my notes. See, that's what happens when you talk for a while. Now, there's another side to this. The problem with uncertainty is that sometimes we get evidence, but we refuse to make a choice. And I want to show you what that looks like. Corey, I'll pick on you for that one. Is that okay? Is that going to disturb you? You can stay over here if that helps. See, we Mark on one side, Corey on the other. All right, same thing. Hands, there you go. Perfect. All right, because you probably can't see what's in my hand, I'll show you. Okay, same task. Tell me which one's heavier. But before you do, I have to add one caveat. You have to eat the one you pick. So I would judge closely. You ever seen, the Holy Grail? Yeah. Choose wisely. Oh, same question. Which one's heavier? But now there's consequence.
This one feels heavy.
You sure? Why aren't you sure? Isn't the evidence clear?
Because I can't see the label.
Is your uncertainty based on evidence or based on consequence? All right. All right, you can open your eyes. You chose wisely. Most wisely. Why was it so much harder for him to choose? The difference between the cans is exactly it's actually more than the difference between the first two. 2 ounces versus 1. Why is it so much harder for him to choose in that case? Is his sense of weight so much worse than Mark's? Probably not. Why didn't he want to choose right away? Because his choice had a consequence attached to it. Why is it that juries get together for murder trials and often, or trials with significant life-changing consequences? Why can't 100% of those juries come to a decision? Is it because the evidence presented is so much worse than all other trials? No. It's because that trial will lead to life-altering consequences. If you're at a trial over a $100 bill at a restaurant, you're probably going to come to a pretty quick decision. If you're at a trial over life in prison, Now the shoe's different, isn't it? This is the other side of doubt that the Bible talks about. The side of doubt that isn't just you looking at evidence and making a decision, but the side of doubt that says you've looked not only at the evidence, but the outcome of your choice, and because of that, you've refused to choose. That's the negative side of doubt. And that same Greek word is used to describe those sorts of situations. In Matthew chapter 21 and verse 21, it is not a refusal to reach, it's a refusal to reach a clear decision, which is itself a decision not to believe. Jesus tells his disciples in Matthew 21 and verse 21, truly I say to you, if you have faith and do not doubt, you will not only do what's been done to this fig tree, but even if you say to this mountain, be taken up and thrown into the sea, it will happen. Is Jesus telling his followers you're going to be land movers? No. He's telling them you got to make a choice. You have to choose Christ. Choose to believe Him. Choose to act based on what He's told us to do. Choose to take up your cross and follow Him. You have two choices. You choose Christ or you don't. Now, does it matter at the end of the day whether you've told Christ no or whether you've told Christ not yet? At the end of the day, they're no different. Geddy Lee from Rush once said, if you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice, right? Now that song is actually fairly anti-religious, so I don't condone the whole thing, but he had a point. If you decide, I just don't know. I don't know, man. I don't know if I could follow. Man, I have counted the cost and I just cannot say yes. That's bad doubt. In Romans 4 and in verse 20, when it's speaking of Abraham's faith, he said, Paul so said of Abraham, no belief made him waver concerning the promise of God. Do you know what Abraham refused to do? He didn't refuse to have questions. He didn't refuse to have uncertainties. He refused to choose something other than, I will follow God. Even when uncertain. Even when, as we talked about in Bible class the last couple Sundays, he had no clue where God was going to tell him to go next. But he made his choice, and his choice was, I choose God. And it said of him that he grew strong in his faith as he gave glory to God. James chapter 1 and verse 6 uses this word doubt in this sense a couple of times. In describing in the verses that precede this, if anyone lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, right? Just before this. But here's the alternative. But let him ask in faith, with no doubting. For the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea that's driven and tossed by the wind. That person must not suppose he'll receive anything from the Lord. He's a double-minded man, unstable in all his ways. Sometimes you read this and you think, God, give him a break. He's having trouble. He's just got questions. He's just got doubts and he just doesn't know, so we just all need to be real patient with him. James is telling us, this person's standing there with the green beans and the dog food going, I just don't know. I don't get it. God has given me this wisdom, but man, this looks awful good over here. No, that's not a valid question to ask. Is this better than this? Clearly one of these is better than the other. And James is saying, if you refuse to admit that, don't suppose you're going to receive the positive thing you need or you want from God. He's a double-minded person. Put it like this. Suppose one of the young men in the room, who are all over here, suppose one of you asked one of the young ladies to marry them. Now, we know what it would mean if she said yes, right? You did good, all right? We know what it would mean if she said no. It's awkward, but clear. What would it mean, fellas, if the girl said, I'll get back with you? And then you come back in 3 or 4 days. Well, what do you think? I don't know. I just need more time. And then you come back in a week and a half. I need more time. I'm still working on it. Don't rush me. Do we all know what that means, guys? She's saying no. She just doesn't have the heart to say no. Right? She doesn't hurt your feelings, but the answer is no. Is there a difference between no and I don't know at that point? No. You've been rejected. Indecision is refusing to choose based on consequences, not evidence. And I think the best place to see this is Matthew chapter 16, verses 1 through 4, as we read just a second ago. Indecision or negative doubt manifests when we have weighed the evidence, when we have counted the cost, you might say, and we refuse to choose not because of the weight of evidence, but because of where that evidence leads. That form of doubt is spoken against often. And I think Jesus calls out this form of doubt in the Pharisees of his time. In Matthew chapter 16 and verse 1, the Pharisees and Sadducees came, and to test him, they asked him, Jesus, to show them a sign from heaven. He answered them, when it's evening, you say, it'll be fair weather, for the sky is red. And in the morning, it'll be stormy today, for the sky is red and threatening. Now notice the point Jesus makes. You know how to interpret the appearance of the sky, but you cannot interpret the signs of the times. Now, is Jesus being unfair with them? Is he genuinely saying, well, I guess you're able to tell what's going on in the sky, but when it comes to the coming of the Messiah, okay, well, I guess you just can't figure it out. No, because he calls them an evil and adulterous generation for asking for such a sign. What's their problem? Is it the weight of evidence? No. Why do you come to a guy and ask him for a sign from heaven unless you believe he can do it? Which means he's demonstrated the ability to do it. The prosecution has rested on who Jesus is to this point. He is the Son of David. He is the Messiah. He is the Christ. He has demonstrated time and again. Read Matthew up to chapter 16. It's riddled with miracles. It's not that they can't decide. It's that they won't decide because of the consequences. What would happen if they said, yes, he's the Christ? Well, now they have to submit. Now they have to honor him. Now he is in charge. Well, he is in charge, but now they have to recognize that. Now everything in their life changes. It's kind of like when the rich young ruler was told by Jesus what he should do. Remember the story? Jesus tells the man, go and sell all you have and give to the poor and come follow. You'll have treasure in heaven and come follow me. The man went away sorrowful, for he had many possessions. Did he leave Jesus because he just wasn't convinced? No. He left Jesus because the choice to follow Jesus cost him too much. If Christianity is true, then everything changes. And that's when you have to ask yourself this question. If you just find yourself unable to choose becoming a Christian, unable to choose Christ, you have to figure out, is it because you're struggling with evidence, or is it because you're struggling with consequences? We know why people exhibit indecision when it comes to Jesus. The cost to follow Jesus comes with consequences, and Jesus was abundantly clear as to what those consequences were. That was part of our discussion last night, right? Was it Matthew 10 and Luke 14? Were those the two? Yeah. Matthew 10 and Luke 14, two different places in the Gospels where Jesus describes to his followers, listen, if you follow me, serious things are going to happen. Your relationship with your family is going to change. People are later on in John's Gospel, Jesus would tell them the world would hate you. Everything is different now. Does that make Christ any less true? No. If Christianity is true, then I have to wrestle with the fact that Christians don't always behave as Christians should. Some people struggle to come to Christ not because of Christ, but because of other people who've come to Christ, and they behave in absolutely abhorrent, un-Christ-like ways. And they've said, if this is Christianity, I want no part of it. And I say, Christianity is not our failures. Christianity is Christ and what He did. And if you judge it based on the flaws of His followers, heaven help us. If Christianity is true, I have to accept that God's ways are higher than mine. And my choices are now subject to His decisions. And frankly, some refuse to accept that. And so while they never actually tell Jesus no, they refuse to say yes. And in refusing to say yes, they've made a choice. Now, how do I tell the difference? How do I tell whether or not my doubt is good or bad? I'm not able to bore into anyone's head and tell you for yourself. But it is going to require honesty. Honesty with yourself. Am I refusing to make this choice because evidence has been presented that has caused me to question? Or am I refusing Christ, not because of the evidence, but because of what will happen next? You see, people who read Scripture, people who study it for themselves or listen to others who've studied it, they've been given evidence to follow Christ. Look at the story in Scripture. Look at the creation itself. Look at the evidence surrounding Jesus. Look for the proofs of His being the Messiah. Look at all the different ways people in the first century responded to that good news. Look at the way those who opposed Christ now turned to Christ. All that evidence has been presented, and we've said these are all tremendously good reasons why you should choose Christ. But the problem is we live in a world that tells the other side, that presents its own evidence. And sometimes the world's very good at their presentation. Sometimes the other side of the argument is powerful, and they bring up things we've never thought of. And they bring up evidence that seems, at least according to them, to point to their conclusions. It is not wrong for a Christian to receive such information and go, I don't know. That's based on some sort of evidence being shown you. But I'm afraid more often than not, our questions don't come from evidence. They come from recognizing something that will happen if I choose to believe. A relationship I will lose. Something I'll have to sacrifice. A position I'll have to give up. Something I'll have to admit about my parents. It's not that Christ is any less true. They've counted the cost and said it's too high. If you are having the uncertain form of doubt, first of all, take it easy on yourself. Unbelief is an act of the will. It is a decision to refuse to believe in God or Jesus or the gospel. If you are uncertain, you are not sinning. If you are uncertain, you are human. You do not know things with absolute certainty. We are making judgments based on best evidence. Solid evidence, but judgments nonetheless. When a question comes into your mind based on presentation of new information, it's not there because you don't have faith. You are wrestling with it because you have faith. If you didn't have faith in Christ, then evidence to the contrary wouldn't bother you. But because you've made a decision about Jesus, and something else gets presented, and that something else bothers you, good. Work through it. Go to good sources of information. If you get a question about something, and this doubt enters your mind, and you run directly to the X Church of Christ YouTube page for answers, you're not going to get good information. Don't be surprised at what you hear. Okay? Do like any discerning person would do in a jury. Judge the quality of the information, where it's sourced from. We can exhibit honesty in our search for truth, and we can help one another work through difficulties. If anyone's got it all figured out, I need a name and a phone number, because we got some stuff to talk about. I get text messages, not all the time, but on a pretty regular basis. Hey, what about this passage? I got one a little over a week ago. I'm still working on it. Okay? But I'm trying. And if your doubt is of the uncertain variety, go search out your answer. Go find the truth. If Christianity were so fragile that it would crumble under the weight of a question, why are we all still around here doing this? If it were so flawed, and so messed up, and so weak, explain 2,000 years of human history in which we believe that Jesus is the Son of God. The truth is, it's not. But the other side of the argument is very good at what they do. We've got to recognize that. If your doubt is on the other side, you have to be honest with yourself about that too. If you put yourself back in the courtroom for just a moment and you suppose that the guilty verdict would render the death penalty, you can understand why someone would alter their decision based on the fact. Truth is like elections, it has consequences. Truth has consequences. And sometimes we decide to abandon truth to avoid consequences. What good is the peace we have if it's based on a lie? The Pharisees of Matthew chapter 16 knew full well what it would mean if Jesus were the Messiah, and they refused to accept Him not based on lack of evidence, but based on depth of consequence. And if Christianity is true, everything changes after that. In Luke chapter 18, the rich young ruler came to Jesus, addressing Him as good teacher. He already had evidence to that effect. He didn't come up saying, good teacher. No, he already knew Jesus was a good teacher. And he come and asked his question, and he got an answer. He went away sorrowful because the answer meant he would sacrifice much. If you're refusing to choose Christ because of consequences, then you have to be honest about that with yourself. You've got to come to terms with that. You need to ask yourself, is Christ better than whatever consequence I fear from choosing Him? Is Christ better than losing a relationship? Is Christ better than having to change my life situation? Is Christ better than having to sacrifice something for Him? And then you need to choose Christ. My final question of the morning is this one. When you find the truth, what do you do with it? Doubt is essentially a response to a search for the truth. The Jews of Jesus' time were given ample, abundant evidence as to who He was. Some people have this misguided notion that, well, if Christ could come today and do a miracle, we'd believe in Him. Yeah, Christ came then and He did dozens of them that we know of. And they still chanted around His cross, crucifying Him. Let Him come down if He's the Son of God. My question to you is, when you find the truth, what are you going to do with it? Are you going to react? Are you going to respond positively? If you've had your uncertain moment and you've searched it out and you've figured out the truth, now what? If you have enough evidence this morning to believe that Jesus of Nazareth is the Son of God, and that the message that He taught and the message He taught His followers to speak, if you have enough evidence to show that that's legitimate, what are you going to do about it? I think of the Ethiopian eunuch, who was by Philip presented with enough evidence to believe. We know what he did with it. See, here is water. What prevents me from being baptized? He had enough evidence. And when he found the truth, he acted on it and was saved and went home rejoicing. You think his life situation changed after that? Without question. But Christ was worth that to him. It breaks my heart to say that for so many people, it's not worth it to them. If you are a Christian, and you've decided by the way you're living, or the choices you've made, that there is a better way, first off, where's your evidence? Will you dare stand before the throne of God and say, you know, the green beans are good, but this is better? I hope not. I hope this morning you'll choose Christ. Whether that's initially in terms of becoming a Christian, or that's coming back to that relationship. God gives us time to make the decision. And He gives us plenty of evidence. We're the ones that have to choose Christ. We have to say yes. And if that's your intent today, we'd love nothing more than to help you do that. To choose Jesus. And make your decision and follow Him. If that's the case, we're going to sing a song. During that song, if you come down to the front row, let me or someone nearby know. We'll help you. We're not any better. We're just hopefully further along that same path. We'd love nothing more than to bring you with. If we can help you this morning, I invite you to come as we stand and as we sing.